Here we are, documentary of Nanna and Pop's 2022.
Take one.
Take one and only.
Who is your favourite grandchild?
Oh, you mean? We've got no favourites. Honestly, we haven't.
If you had to choose one, otherwise you're going to get two.
One, or you're off the balcony.
They'd go off the balcony.
Are you talking to me or Poppy?
Both.
No, I can't think. I think the one that's at the moment brought us so much joy is Freddie
Yeah.
Jack. And we love it, the fact that he's been here and we're sleeping in the same place and enjoying all of our grandchildren, especially Freddie.
I think having Freddie here is reminding us of you kids and the grandkids when you were younger. Yeah, it just brings up so much memories. Even the feel, the smell, good and bad. I thoroughly enjoyed parenting. I'd love the contact with you guys, always had contact with us.
Do you prefer Australia or New Zealand?
As a country, I think I prefer New Zealand.
Yes, I would be the same. I could live in Australia, but because we've had such a lot to do with it, but no place like New Zealand.
I think being lots of family, more family in Australia than in New Zealand. If we had to choose, that would be very hard. But I think Australia is nice too. But it's got its down points.
Indonesia or New Zealand?
New Zealand.
New Zealand, yes.
South Island or North Island?
I think it would depend. South Island for a holiday to see the mountains and all the sights of the South Island. But we're happy living in the north.
I think we can settle anywhere. I've always said that wherever Jack is, I'm happy there. That's home.
Would you prefer Chris or Phil?
Is this supposed to be serious?
We're getting there. We're going to warm you up.
Getting in trouble. Yes, it's serious. You have to choose one of the twins. Which one would you choose?
Well, they taught us a lot.
If I needed a sign writer, I would choose Phil. If I needed a nurse, I would choose Christine.
Yes, of course.
How did you meet?
We knew each other in a church in Wellington, but we got serious about each other when we were at a camp, a youth camp in Te Horo, north of Wellington.
Yeah, we were at this camp and I had started thinking, yeah, Jack's a neat guy. We were in the same youth group in Wellington City, but we were just friends, and we were outside in a big paddock or bush paddock. It was out this farm, and we had they threw faggots, that's logs of wood, into a bonfire, and when you did that you told your story or a testimony, and it was after that I felt this body beside me, and it was Jack came and sat beside me, and that was the start of him starting to take more interest in me. In fact, I used to go walking up in the hills at Tihoro, north of Wellington, and Jack was starting to come into my thoughts, and I didn't want to because I'd been asked if I'd think about going to Indonesia as a nurse. I didn't want anything to get in the way of what God wanted me to do, because that's just what I want to do. So I remember walking up this country road and shouting out, "Get him out of my thoughts, Lord. Get him out of my thoughts." And
I was glad God didn't answer that prayer. It was to Papua New Guinea,
yes,
wasn't it? You were asked to go as a nurse.
yeah, and then I had to make up my mind, was I going to get in Jack's way or in my way? And so that's how it really started, and then he started taking me to another farm to get milk. So we went to get the milk for the camp, and so people were starting to look, there's another one going. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's how it started anyhow. And it wasn't long after that I had to carry on finishing my midwifery training. So I had to wait till I'd done that. It was only about 6 months after that Jack had gone to Bible school in Hamilton.
And we were engaged after 6 months.
Yeah.
And married after a year.
Another 6 months.
Yeah.
It was so quick, but we knew it was right.
How did you know?
I don't know. Looking back, I don't know. I've tried to analyse that, but we just knew it was right. I wasn't interested in boys, unless the right one came.
Yeah.
I made Jack saw me once, I don't know when that was, he said, "Did you make that frock or dress?" And he'd been reading Proverbs about this, who was it, the woman that was clothed in purple, made her own clothes.
Above rubies, chapter 31 of Proverbs.
So he thought that was the answer, and this frock did have purple or mauve flowers on it.
Yeah, I just knew it was right. You know, some things you just know, and there was no doubt in my mind.
We didn't spend much time together because after the camp, Jack went to Hamilton to Bible school, and I went back to Nelson to finish the midwifery bonds that we had to fulfil. He'd come down occasionally, and I had a car. Yeah. I had money, Jack didn't, because he'd used all his money on not retribution, but paying back all the money he'd been dishonestly, before he was a Christian, he'd sold cars and been very dishonest, and so when he became a Christian he felt he had to pay back what he had stolen. And, so it was me that saved money, and I had a car. By this time he had sold his own cars. Yeah. So when we got married, it was we lived on the skin of our teeth.
Was there a time when your marriage was on the rocks?
I don't know about on the rocks, but we have had times, but we've always talked. I think that's been our saviour, hasn't it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yes, when we got married, I was just so, it was so new to me. I'd never flattered, so I didn't know the first thing about cooking.
Neither did I.
Yeah. So I think it was probably harder well, it was harder for April the first year of our marriage, but we slowly sorted our problems and
I could have left him if I had had somewhere to go, but I was right away from, I wanted a flat or a hut in the bush somewhere. I couldn't imagine living with a guy and having to share my finance and share everything because I was very independent. So the first year it was me that struggled, and if there was a hut somewhere I could have gone to, I would have gone. But my mum and dad were in Nelson, so I would never have gone back there. And so that first year it wasn't rocky as far as our relationship was, but it wasn't very comfortable because Jack, he was always so keen on doing things for God and very outright and going to open air meetings and I wasn't so energetic that way. Yeah, I think he took me for granted because he was young. Oh, we were 24, but he hadn't really grown up in some ways. So, but God kept the glue going.
yeah. And it's now 64 years since that day.
64 years.
Yes, to the same person.
What's been the vision for your marriage, or the values that you built your marriage upon?
Do you want to answer that? Do you want to answer that?
No, you can.
Well, it was, you could say it was God. We wanted to honour God. We were grateful for I was especially grateful for the change in my life. April has been a Christian since she was about 4 years old. So it's interesting, I worked out the other day that April's been a Christian and never looked back for 84 years, maybe 85. So that's a great blessing. Yeah, so honesty was a big thing. Honesty with our relationship. We learned that eventually. And putting God first in our lives and doing our best to follow Jesus and following his example and also his teaching. And I say following because we were still had a long way to go and still do. Yeah.
What are you most proud of in your lifetime?
Our family.
Yeah. Yes, we're really grateful. You know, we hear of families splitting up and terrible things happening, but we've never had a blazing row. As we said before, we like to talk things out. Yeah.
And we've enjoyed life. We've loved living. And we've had fun.
Yeah.
We've had kids that have loved fun.
Yeah, April's motto for a long time was enjoy God. And I think that's inspired. If we're enjoying God, then what's more important? Yeah.
I think we've always prayed together. All our married life, we prayed every morning. I can remember in Rotorua, we had a huge desk, and in the middle of it, you could get underneath it. Well, Judas could. and she wasn't at school then. But we'd usually be in the study and we'd pray after the other kids went to school. She would always crawl underneath this desk. I used to laugh, crawling under there while we were praying every day. And watching all of you kids, what you've done. Even the careers you've chosen, it's been a great pleasure.
Yes.
Now it's the next generation that we believe will be passed on. We're also grateful for what's been passed down to us. Jack's mum, and we don't know parts of his generation, but mine's been generations after generations of people that have followed the Lord.
Yeah. Yes, Avril's got some letters. One of them's 100 years old. One of her, was it your great-grandfather? Writing to his son, telling him to keep going for God, not go back. And her parents being Salvation Army officers. And although they eventually left the Salvation Army, the Salvation Army spirit never left them. They just lived to give.
This great grandfather, they called him Mad Jack because he was, how would you describe him? He's an expert,
Drunkard, but an expert horseman or wagon driver.
He could do anything. Drove oxen and horses, and he was Nelson's town drunk. But every Friday night he'd go into the Salvation Army church. Then one night the Salvation Army officer came up to him and said, "Mr. Packer, what's it going to be? Is it going to be life or death?" And evidently he threw his cap in the aisle and said, "It's going to be life." And he walked up to the front, as they did in those days, and he gave his life to the Lord. And then I read a letter to my grandfather, his son, telling him about it's time you get right and walk with God. Yeah, we've got, that's all in the manual that we've got. Yeah. Great history. And we don't know about Jack's side, but we know his mum was an ardent follower of the Lord.
Yeah, she was. Yes, we had there were 7 kids in our family, and my oldest daughter Dorothy, she was a keen Christian, but the other 6 of us weren't initially. And I don't remember my mother ever preaching at me, but I knew she was praying, and it was like God lined us up, and I was the next, and my brother Barney was next, and the other girls, one by one, they came to know the Lord, until the whole of us 7 children were walking with God. Yeah. So the power of prayer is amazing.
Do you have any regrets in your life?
I think
Oh, carry on.
I think I regret that I never talked openly with our kids. We'd pray with them every night, and when they went to school, we'd pray. We used to sing a lot because they were always singing. And but what I have regretted that, and I've done this more with the grandchildren, is before they go to sleep at night, and we've always prayed for them and prayed with them, but not asked them how their day's gone. How's your day gone? What's been the best thing that's happened today? What's been the worst thing? And so that they were part of our thinking. That's something I would like to do now.
Yeah.
But you do learn a lot through your children.
Yeah. They're your best teachers.
Yeah.
I regret that we were part of them. Well, I don't regret that I was part of the apostolic movement, but I regret that they were, we were sent to so many different places. It was a bit like the Salvation Army, that they would check where everybody is every year and then send this to this town and something else to replace them in that town. And we just lived in so many places. And really it wasn't until I think the late 70s we finally went to a place that was live-in, and we were there for 13 or 14 years, and that was the most fruitful period of our life, I believe. And yeah, so that's my regret, that I could have stood up and said, you know, we've had enough movement. In fact, I used to say, bury me in Timaru, because I wasn't going to go anywhere else. And when I got this phone call from the pastor at Live-In, asking me to go there, I said, no, John, this is my final place. And he said, have you prayed about it? And I said, no. It's just a conviction, and our children were all in places where they'd started, Chris and Philip had started work, and Ruth was doing his university entrance, and I realised too that all the shifting wasn't doing them any good, although in some cases it made them more adaptable. Anyway, that was just one regret. And after Live-In, that opened the way for us to travel in Asia for some years. Yeah.
And you wouldn't have had me.
True. Yes.
What was that like when Mum got pregnant with me?
It was a shock. Yeah. No, it was a shock, but we did love you before you were born. We prayed for you before you were born. Places that we went to, they accepted you after you were born.
And even we went to Christchurch to look after a church where the pastor was away for some months, I forget how long, and we told the elders, because Judith was with us, and we talked to the elders and said our daughter's unmarried but she's pregnant, and they accepted. In fact, a number of them said, well, we've been through the same thing, and Judith was prayed for by others, which was great. And then after you were born and your mum decided to go back to Sydney, I remember being in the airport and your mum went away for something, and I was nursing, holding you, and I took the opportunity to pray for you and dedicate you to the Lord, and we saw that prayer answered when you were in London. Yeah. And that excited us. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got this rich legacy of faith, both sides. You both came to know Jesus in your own way at an early age
Yes.
and lived this massive life of ministry, church planting, preaching, raising kids, moving, missions trips overseas, and now you're 89 and 90.
Hey, not until next year.
89. You're both 89.
No, he's not. No.
You're 90.
I'm,
He's 88.
I'm 88.
I'm 6 months older
He's a
than him.
spring chicken.
I was told otherwise.
What, Jack?
Yeah.
He thinks he's the boss. I'm the boss for 6 months.
Someone told me you were 90. What has kept you in relationship with Jesus?
His faithfulness, I think. Being aware of his presence.
Thank you, boss.
What?
Well, I was asked a question. You asked it.
Oh, you said ask the boss.
But that was true.
Is that it?
It's up to you.
And I think what kept me faithful was the Lord himself, assisted by Avril.
I think we've never hid anything from each other. And I've never been fearful of him. I've always been aware that I can tell Jake anything. So we've been pretty open with how we feel.
What's it like not just having kids, grandkids, but great grandkids?
Well, that's something special because I never thought I would live to see great grandchildren, and now we've got six great grandchildren, and that's a huge blessing, a privilege too.
I think coming to live in Waikanae was a highlight of our life, because although we've got so many relations everywhere, we've never ever lived near any of them. And coming to live was great. And then to add 3, Sam, Grace and Adam. Alex, whoops. Yeah.
It's an A. It's close.
Yeah, in the same town. So we've been there, Nanna and Pop, in the flesh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been special.
Yes.
What do you love most about Phil?
About Phil.
It's great seeing his success. We had a report once that we kept, and the teacher said, Phil will never do any good. He doesn't focus, or I forget all the details. So we framed that and hung it in his office, and he was quite amused about that. And he said that business people have come into his office and read that and said, I got one worse than that. And it seemed to be the age when teachers were telling kids they were dumb. I was told that. And it's like a curse that follows you. And that was my experience too. Yeah.
I think for Phil, his hard work has made him what he is. As a young baby, you always knew where Philip was. There was always noise. It was either noise or he was asleep somewhere. He was always go, 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 or he'd be asleep. Christine followed, not so much as Philip. They were totally different kids. But he was very, very energetic. Wiry, loved laughing.
Yeah.
What do you admire most about Christine?
I think her stickability too.
Yeah.
Amazing. She's hung in there and
Yeah. And the way she handled the death of Annie, that really proved something very admirable in Chris. And we stayed in their house with them, Chris and Mark, for about 9 months, and we saw gradually they got through that terrible thing, and yeah, and Chris's spontaneity, yeah, she'll drop everything and try something else, and also her hard work. Not quite the same as Philip, but just as impressive, the way she's got these university papers and in her early 60s getting a counselling degree. Yeah. Got anything to say?
What do you love about your middle child, Ruth?
Oh, this is hard. Because we love them all and they're all so different. All so different.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had to drown one, I used to say it was hard having 5 kids because you had to divide everything into 5. So I used to say, you know, if we drowned one, it'll be easier to divide a pizza. But I didn't know which one, and it was too hard to make another one, so we stuck to our 5. So you telling us to choose which one of our kids we admire the most?
No, I said Ruth. What do you love
I
about
know.
Ruth?
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think you can do that. I admire. I think we admire them all because they're all so different. All of our kids are so different.
I think Ruth, I always think of her as a woman of peace. She seems unflappable, almost. And yeah, and she's entrepreneurial in a way, starting this choose plants instead, sorry. And the way she's worked, yeah, just gets on with life quietly. And she's got a good reputation among medical people. The way she's stuck with the cosmetic surgeon guy, and also the looking after the what do you call them?
Spinal.
Yeah, the spinal kids, and also
There's a lot to remember, isn't there? She does so many
Yes.
jobs.
She
Yeah.
has
She
that.
is entrepreneurial, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
yeah.
Now you thought this child wasn't yours because she had dark black hair and she was meant to be a boy.
Oh, Judith.
Yes.
What were you
Judith
saying?
has taught you a lot in life, but what do you love most about her?
It's a bit like Christine, spontaneous. You never quite knew what she was going to do. It was always with enthusiasm. You had to run to keep after her because she was, as a baby, she was or toddler. She was always talking. I think she was born talking.
Yeah.
She said some funny things, and in Rotorua when we lived there, she kept running away from us when we went to town. So one time we thought, oh, you'll leave, or we'll just leave you. We couldn't find her, so we just left and went to another shop. And when we did eventually find her, she was in one of the department stores. I was a bit concerned that we weren't around playing with some of the toys there. So she didn't care. Right, that's right, and we had to tie her up to keep her still at one time. Oh, that's right, in church. I used to have to, because I was on the keyboard, I'd always take her with me. I didn't trust her to sit in the congregation because we didn't have a crate. I'd tie her to the piano leg. Chris, Philip and Ruth, they knew they had to sit down the back playing with their books and that, but I couldn't hold Judith down. She was just she was different. Everything that the others did or didn't do, she did the opposite. She was always the fly in the ointment. Why do I have to go to bed earlier? Why do I have to do this? Because the other three were almost the same age. So because you're older, you're younger.
One day we were in the shop and we bought the three older kids plastic money boxes, and Judith put on a performance. I think she throw herself on the
No,
floor?
she's standing up and she went round and round in circles. Where's Bubbies? Where's Bubbies? Where's Bubbies? She wasn't going to get away with not having one that the other kids had.
Yeah, we're very pleased the way she's been enabled to get this house, which I didn't think there'd be enough money, and she's loved it and worked on it. It really transformed it, really, the house and garden, and she's stuck to her nursing, and even when she had, what's that sickness she had?
Aneurysm. Aneurysm.
Yeah, but before that, after she came back from India.
Meningococcal.
Yeah.
Meningitis.
She said them all.
I think she's a woman of vision too.
Yeah. Meningitis.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Meningococcal.
I don't know the difference.
Scott from the mind.
And lucky last, number 5,
The baby,
the baby, Andrew.
your final boy.
Okay.
Yeah. He's been very successful with what he's done. The last part of his degree, he had one last assignment, and the typewriter he was using stopped working. It was one of the early electric typewriters. So he came down to live in and wanted to borrow the church typewriter, and I think it was late at night, and so he worked as long as it took through the night and got his assignment back in Palmerston North, which very last minute stuff, and he's been a last minute in lots of ways, but always succeeded. And he's done well in his work. He's been headhunted the last 2 jobs he's got, and he's done very well. And I would say he's a man of integrity. I don't think he would rip anybody off. In fact, I don't think any of the kids would. Yeah, so, and as April said, it's been lovely having him in our town and being involved with their 3 children. Yeah. And with his wife too, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything to add?
Could you attempt to list your grandkids in order?
In age, yes.
In name?
In name.
Could we name them?
Yes.
I think so. I couldn't.
Go for it.
I don't think I could with their birthdays.
Just their names.
Okay. Oh, Judith. It's a bad one to ask me.
Jazz comes first.
Oh, okay. There was Jez, and she was certainly special because she was the first one. In order, Jasmine, Leon, Grace.
You've skipped a few.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, so I've got them in families in my head. Yeah. Okay, we'll go to.
Sabina?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Sabina. And then Joel. Jackson. And that fella.
Freddie. Oh, Kayla.
Oh, Kayla.
I forgot your name.
Kayla.
Yes.
Oh, Sam. He's one of the older ones. Leon. Yeah. Amy would have been 4 years younger than her. Joel, Jackson,
This is a trick question.
Jacob.
Jacob, yeah, Jake. Oh, Zoe, she's up there. Who have I missed?
Sam and Grace and Alex.
Oh, Adam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Adam and Alex.
Well done, guys.
Missed Rowan and Annie.
And Rowan and Annie.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yes, yeah. I did put Rowan in.
You do.
Rowan.
Yeah.
How do you feel about dying?
Not a problem. No, it was funny when I was diagnosed with colon cancer. It didn't disturb me at all. It wasn't unusual. I probably was more upset. But it was a challenge, but I knew there was something wrong, and it was almost a relief to know that it didn't faze me at all. Yeah. And it hasn't, but it's the worst thing is leaving him, leaving Jake, and leaving the family. Although you know it has to happen. We can't stay here forever. We've had a good life, but it's our faith, I suppose, in the Lord that has given us confidence.
Yeah.
And it's funny, after that, nothing worried me, because we didn't know which way it was going to go. And I didn't feel I want to read the Bible. Nothing. I wasn't reading, looking for answers. But I just felt surrounded. I realised so many people were praying for me and praying for us. And I just felt kind of snuggled in a cocoon. And I think that's the Lord keeps you.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Dying. Somebody said everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And but we know it's got to happen. And I don't want to die. I mean, naturally speaking, I'd just like to keep living.
Because we love
Sure.
life.
And yeah, we'd love to see another generation. Yeah. Somebody said, don't take life too seriously because nobody gets out alive. And that's true. But we thank God for the promises in the Word and in the Bible. And we know there's a far better life awaiting us, whatever age we die. Yeah.
After I was up, evidently my heart stopped for 15 seconds, and I just can remember being stuck. I couldn't move anything, and then I heard them yelling out, "April, April!" It was like from a long, long way away, and I couldn't lift my hands. I was almost like glued to the. Slowly, I tried to lift my hands, but I couldn't move a thing. I just heard, and then I slowly opened my eyes, and it didn't worry me. I think that's
Good COVID sneezing, Pops.
right.
Good COVID sneezing with the elbow.
Oh, right. Well trained.
What's one promise from the Bible that you would love to leave your kids, grandkids, great-grandkids with?
There's so many. I love Psalm 91, which is a huge story of God's protection. I was once told by a doctor that they didn't know what was wrong with me. This is some years ago. And they said a number of things, including cancer, that was a possibility. So my reaction wasn't distress or anything. But I was reading Psalm 91, and it said, because I wanted to know how to react, that I knew I shouldn't panic or anything like that. And I was reading Psalm 91, and I read, do not fear the disease that stalks in darkness. And I thought, that's a picture of cancer. And my direction was, do not fear. So that's what I knew I had to avoid, was fear. But we've had other amazing promises. One day I was reading Psalm 121, I believe it is, where God doesn't slumber nor sleep. He'll look after you going out and you're coming in. And we were going to India and Punjab and Philippines, I think it was, and Singapore and I think Indonesia. It was a big trip. And why did I tell you that? Oh, that's right. So I had this promise and I thought, is this real? Does God really mean what he says? He'll look after my coming in and coming out and going in. And he doesn't slumber nor sleep and so on. So I thought, why do we need travel insurance? And I've never questioned that. And I've always had it when we've gone overseas. And I just thought it seems crazy if these promises are true, which I knew they were. But telling April was different. and telling the travel agent, she's eventually said, you've got to follow your instincts, and I wasn't following that. So I had to make up my mind and tell her what we would do about this travel insurance by Friday. And April's reading on Friday, I believe it's Psalm 37,
Yeah.
and it said in the Message Bible, get insurance with God. So that convinced us that that's what we should do. And going on the road to the Punjab, the first accident we saw was a truck carrying steel pipes, and it had smashed into something, and all the pipes had gone into the cab of the truck and probably decapitated the driver. And then we saw another bus off the road and another van with no windscreen, and a guy sitting in there, his eyes wide open but obviously dead. And we drove all over the Punjab and went to those various countries. And I thought, when I saw these accidents on the road, what good would travel insurance do for us if we were smashed up like that? So that was an amazing guidance from God. Yeah. So I guess you could say that's the most spectacular that I can think of. But we always read and endeavour to believe the promises of God. Yeah.
What's your last piece of advice or wisdom that you'd want to give the generations to come? Great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, your family that will be here long after you're gone.
You can answer that.
I think always remember that God cares for you. When you're in trouble, or before you're in trouble, just ask God to show me what you want. Show me your will, Lord, or God, I want you, I need you. I want you to speak to me. I want to hear you. Always be open to hear what God wants to say to you, and He will speak. You ask Him, He will answer. We've proved it.
Yeah.
And continue to prove it again and again. The Lord is our security. We've been in very insecure places, but we've always known that God's brought us out and made us feel confident and secure, knowing that we are aware of His presence.
And you know, I often think of the scripture, we are kept by the power of God. And so it's not our efforts, it's God's power that, as April just said, looks after us, hears us when we pray. I remember talking to a guy once, and I was telling him about a healing April had, and he was mocking and saying, it's all in the mind, Jack, he said. And I thought to myself afterwards, we've proved God all these years, and it made me just laugh at the guy that thought he could talk me out of it by saying it's all in our mind, when it's been real, and we've proved it so. Amen.
Yes, amen.
Finish.
Cut, do the Finished.